Thirdly, God wants to promote you. God wants to promote you to a position of great power and authority. He wants you to become very influential and a significant person. But what's likely to happen? Most of us will die without ever holding any high position of prominence or power. And finally, I will assert that God wants you to be famous, even world famous. But what's likely to happen in our lives? The vast majority of us will die in relative obscurity. Apart from a few close friends and some relatives in a small town in rural Midwest, very few people will know that you lived nor care that you died. Can you tell that I have the spiritual gift of encouragement? I just want this to be an uplifting sermon for you. But seriously, if those are the things that you're living for, you will waste your life and you will die a tragic death. And it's not because God doesn't want those things for you. He does. God wants you to be wealthy. He wants you to be healthy. He wants to promote you to great positions of significance and authority. He wants to even make you famous. But not here. Not yet. For many of us, death will likely come before the fulfillment of the promise does. The promise is real. Make no mistake. The promise is real, and it will be fulfilled. But not here. Not yet. And here's the irony. Here's the great kingdom irony, I think, that wealth and power, position and fame, and health cannot be obtained by pursuing them. Now, granted, if you're very dedicated, you could achieve some of these things for a short period of time, but you cannot keep them because ultimately death will just strip it all away, right? And it really doesn't matter how rich you are. The richest person in the world doesn't have enough money to purchase a single extra hour of life. And it really doesn't matter how powerful you are. The most powerful man in the world cannot sustain his grip on this life. And it doesn't matter how famous or how popular you are. The most famous people die the most famous deaths. And it really doesn't matter how perfect or prolonged your health is, you'll still die. So the irony is that the only way to achieve these things and to keep them is not to seek after them in the first place. You see, these things are rewarded to those who seek something else. To be more precise, those who seek someone else. See, wealth and health, power and fame can be gained by direct effort, but they cannot be maintained that way. These things are rewards that God gives to those who pursued Him instead. And that brings us to Hebrews 12, verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sitting down at the right hand of the throne of God. That is what we are to pursue. Jesus. Now, if you read Hebrews chapter 11, and you read the whole chapter and you read it very carefully, you'll probably see a theme that's woven throughout the whole chapter, and the theme is rewards or eternal rewards. Some places it's really rather subtle. Other places it's very explicit, but it's all the way through the chapter. And I really wish we had some more time. I'd like to look at some of those specific verses, but we don't have time because I promised you that I was going to build a case for all those things I said God wants for you. So, for example, I made the assertion that God wants you to be rich. Where am I getting that? Well, for starters, I get it from Jesus. Jesus talked about this on several occasions. For example, in Matthew chapter 6, he says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal." Interesting. Doesn't it sound a lot like Jesus wants you to be rich? He even goes on in Luke 12 to tell us about how to do that, how to store up those treasures. Luke 12, he says, "Sell your possessions and give to the poor." Sell what you have, give it to the poor. "Provide purses for yourselves, purses that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will not be exhausted." He wants you to be so rich that you never run out, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. Paul in 1 Timothy 6 says this, "Command those who are rich in the present world, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life." Now, we perhaps don't talk about this very much, but it's interesting. Jesus and Paul here are like financial planners, giving us financial advice about how to make our long-term investments that are not only tax-sheltered, but are guaranteed to pay dividends for eternity. Because you see, God wants you to be rich. He wants you to be extravagantly wealthy. But not here. Not now. What about health? I said that God wants you to be in perfect health. That one's relatively easy. Revelation chapter 21. "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.'" No more death, mourning, crying, or pain. No disease, no sickness, no illness, no suffering, no death. During Jesus' earthly ministry, he was constantly healing the sick, casting out demons, raising the dead. And through that ministry, he was testifying that sickness, disease, pain, suffering do not belong in the kingdom of his Father. Because you see, God's desire for you, God's promise for you, is that you will have perfect health and never, ever die. But not here. Not yet. Third, I asserted that God wants you to be promoted. He wants to promote you to great positions of power and influence. And again, I draw this from the words of Jesus. For example, he talked about this on a couple of occasions. Matthew chapter 25, he told the parable of the talents. Now, talent in that day was an amount of money. And he tells this parable where a master assigns different amounts of money to 3 different servants. Tells him he's going on a long journey and to invest it while he's gone, and when he comes back, he'll collect. And if you know the parable, you know that 2 of the servants were faithful and diligent, and 1 was not. And Jesus says that the servants who were faithful stewards of a small management will be rewarded with management of much greater resources. They will be promoted.